The two films I will be reviewing are Tales from the Golden Age and Goodbye Lenin. Both of these movies are from the post-communist Eastern Bloc, but they are very different. In this video essay, I will be asking the question, to what extent did the portrayal of communism differ between post-communist Germany and Romania? To answer this question, I have selected 15 scenes from the movies, as well as some secondary source articles. While watching these movies, I came to the conclusion that post-communist movies in Romania and Germany both make fun of communism, but because the German film takes place during the transition between communism and capitalism, it also makes fun of capitalism and can better show the extreme contrast between the two ways of life.
Am făcut rost de niște porumbei. Să aruncăm în aer când trece coloana.
Nu-s bun ăștia. Trebuie albi.
Trebuie albi.
Starting off with Tales from the Golden Age, the first scene shows the people from the small town scrambling to get everything ready for the parade. This scene shows how far people had to go to appease the Communist Party. This has a dark humor effect because it's funny how people were scrambling to get pigeons or to replace cows with sheep because the parade had the Indian ambassador on it.
Hai, lăsați toți și hai cu mine! Hai că vă așteaptă tovarăș primar să-i cântați la masă! Te-au balu?
This scene is similar to the first, since it shows us that during communist times, the party always came first, and people were expected to come at the drop of a hat to serve the Communist Party, even though the people were busy packing up the carousel. In the end, this would backfire since all the communist officials would get stuck on the carousel, a metaphor to how communists created their own downfall.
S-a anulat vizita la noi. Să duc în județul Constanța.
Bă, fotu-i gura, măsi!
Arestă-mă și primul acum, vă pare rău?
Dar cum, băi, după cine am pregătit atâta?
Iertați-mă, și în cazul ăsta, cu lanțurile, ce facem?
Ne dăm în ele!
This scene reveals the true nature of the party leaders. They didn't bother to tell the people that the parade was cancelled, and they just started to party and go on the carousel, showing that the Communist Party only really cared about itself and that it wasn't there to serve the people.
Doar că tovarășul secretar general mi se pare prea... trebuie mai înălțat.
Moving on to the next short story, this scene shows how the truth was bent so much over something so inconsequential that it leads the viewer to wonder how much more important events changed to suit the party. All these scenes never actually show the leaders of the party, but always low-level officials or other workers, because the film wants to focus on the day-to-day lives of ordinary people. And if they don't show the top party leaders, it makes it seem even more unknown and sinister. This is the quote-unquote punchline of the short story, showing how the state-run media failed in producing its intended outcome, an indirect reference to how the state itself failed to work in the end and collapsed.
Tovarășul învățător ne-a spus că să nu punem mâna pe omul care se curentează, că ne curentăm și noi.
Tovarășul nu e învățător.
Dar ce e?
Activist.
This scene shows the passive resistance that ordinary people did against the Communist Party. Although the shepherd isn't directly denouncing the party, the shepherd is resisting the education, and by proxy the indoctrination that comes with it, that the Communist Party is offering. Scene 7 is showing the hypocrisy of the communist regime. The activist is trying to teach people how to be safe, but he's directly engaging in activities that he told people not to do, such as touching the pylon with his hands, especially when it's in a thunderstorm. This scene is also a metaphor for the revolution. When the shepherd hits the activist and makes him leave, getting replaced with another teacher who is also from the Communist Party. This shows how, even after the revolution, the new leaders were just as bad and corrupt as the old ones. This scene shows how brutal the communist regime was, locking up its own citizens for protesting against the state. Tales from the Golden Age could never do this because all the people in the movie trust the regime and follow its orders.
Schlummerte, wie Ariane ihr Studium der Wirtschaftstheorie schmiss.
Guten Appetit und vielen Dank, dass Sie sich für Burger King entschieden haben.
Und ihre ersten praktischen Erfahrungen mit der Geldzirkulation machte.
This scene mocks the capitalist regime, showing how many people had to resort to low-paying and demoralizing jobs in order to pay the bills. Tales from the Golden Age only took place during communist times, so it isn't able to make these comparisons between communism and capitalism. This scene shows how incredibly self-aware Goodbye Lenin really is. The Romanian comedy is much more subtle, and all the characters treat the situation seriously. This scene is also a mockery of capitalism, showing what pathetic jobs people had to get wearing a comedic suit in order to pay the bills. Also, because the person in the suit is in the background of the shot, it shows how these kinds of people working meaningless, low-paying jobs are in the background of society, and that we prefer not to think about them so that we don't have to face the inherent problems with capitalism.
Und jedenfalls, mir fällt keine bessere Familie ein als unsere. Und dafür wollte ich dir danken. Mama, du bist die beste Mutter auf der Welt.
Alex?
Und wir lieben dich alle.
Alex?
Was ist denn?
Was ist denn das?
Scene number 11 is also mocking the capitalist system, showing how companies in capitalist societies are as important as the countries themselves. This is also an incredibly suspenseful scene because the viewers know that Alex's mother, although she's outside the frame, can still see the banner being unfurled. Seeing the Coca-Cola flag in what she thinks is communist East Germany makes the viewer incredibly apprehensive to see what Alex will do to cover up the fact that East Germany was no more. This scene is incredibly sad, but also pretty funny, because we're seeing Alex's mother's entire life crumbling around her, when she realizes that East Germany was now a part of capitalist West Germany. It's also funny because it's as if Lenin is holding out his hand to take Alex's mother with him, but actually he's just getting carried away, and him taking her hand is just in her head. Also, because of the use of an over-the-shoulder shot, the film makes it seem as if we are there with her, putting us in her shoes and making us think about the impact seeing this had on her.
Da war er, das Idol meiner Jugend. Wie ein beschworener Geist aus meiner Kindheit. Sigmund Jähn.
This scene is also a mockery of capitalism, showing how a famous astronaut during communist times could fall down from grace and become a lowly taxi driver. The astronaut is also a symbol of Alex's childhood, showing how things from his childhood were actually much different than Alex thought they were. He thought the astronaut was one of the coolest people in the world, but he was just a regular guy.
Alex?
In this scene, his father symbolizes the capitalism that was so despised during the communist times. When he got reunited with his father, Alex thought he could be justifiably mad at his father for leaving them, but it was just bland and unexciting, which is the purpose of the film that director Wolfgang Becker tries to make that the unification of Germany was something uneasy and a bit unwelcome. In Alex's head, he thought his father would be an obese man eating only McDonald's and Burger King, which is the image that capitalism portrayed of capitalism, but it was very different from that. This contrasts very sharply to Alex's view of what communism was, because when he tried to reenact the communist society for his mother, it was sort of a utopia that existed only in his head. But the nostalgia from his childhood made him see communism only as a good, even though he experienced firsthand the terror that it could inflict. So when Alex sits down to talk to his father, he's expecting him to be a very bad, greedy, and gluttonous person, because that was the image of capitalism in the German Democratic Republic when his father left. So when his father is completely different, he starts to question if the communism of his childhood really was that good. The final scene shows Alex saying goodbye to his mother, but also to communism. To him, his mother was the living embodiment of the communist era, and when she died, the last remnant of communism died with her. This is very important for Alex because to him the communism that he created for his mother was really the communism that he wanted, the nostalgic version of it from before his father left. In conclusion, both films are very similar. Both of them call a nostalgic feeling of communism from the title of Tales from the Golden Age to the recreation of communism in Alex's rose-tinted mind. The focus of both of these movies was to criticize communism by using comedy to highlight the inherent problems of communism. But because Goodbye Lenin took place during the transition period between communism and capitalism, it also got to criticize capitalism using humor to highlight its faults. Tales from the Golden Age, however, is much more subtle and takes great advantage of the anthology style of film to convey different messages, such as selfishness of party officials and how the society after the revolution was largely the same, with the same people in charge before and after the revolution.